and some milder air, 12 Celsius in the southwest, whilst 6 or 7 is about as high as it will get further east. The cloud and rain in the west will move east, affecting many places during the evening, an hour or two of wet weather before eventually overnight pushing into the North Sea. That's then replaced by clear spells, but also blustery showers, especially in the west and the northwest. And those showers will be on the heavy side around coasts especially. Temperatures dipping to 3 or 4 Celsius generally, with enough of a breeze to prevent a widespread frost, but perhaps a touch of frost in some sheltered spots first thing, particularly in the east where we'll get some clear skies and some sunshine during Friday morning. And actually, it's looking like a decent day in the east, with plenty of sunny skies for the Midlands, East Anglia, South East England, North East England and Eastern Scotland. Elsewhere, quite a few showers moving through. Hail and thunder mixed in with some of those heavier downpours, especially earlier in the day, and it'll feel cold with a blustery breeze. Into Saturday, and it's a frosty start for many of us, but a bright start before cloud and rain work across the country later on. On Sunday, it's damp in the south, but mild, drier and brighter further north.
Canary Islands sponsors the weather.
You're watching GB News live across the UK and the world on our digital stream.
GB News is Britain's news channel.
We are the UK's home of discussion and debate from all perspectives.
We are here for you. Don't forget to join our YouTube community by clicking on that subscribe button.
And if you want the GB News app, you can click and catch up on programmes anytime.
We love to hear from you, so email us.
gbviews@gbnews.uk.
Thanks for being part of the GB News family.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
A very good morning. Welcome to the briefing live from Downing Street with me, Darren McCaffrey. Coming up over the next 30 minutes on the programme, we'll get the latest as England moves to Plan B with further restrictions on our lives in an attempt to curb the new variant. As the Health Secretary warns, there is a credible risk to the NHS this winter. Also, it is day 2 of the fallout from that video that was leaked on Tuesday night. Lots of angry reaction amongst Conservatives, some terrible front pages for the Prime Minister, yesterday being described as his worst day in office. We'll get all the reaction from inside the Conservative Party. And plus, Angela Merkel bows out as German Chancellor. We'll get the latest about where Germany may be going next under new leadership. That and so much more over the next 30 minutes. But first, at 9, here's the news at the top of the hour.
Hello, I'm Olivia Guthrie. This is your news at 9 o'clock. Boris Johnson is facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. The backlash from the Prime Minister's party comes amid allegations of a Downing Street Christmas party last year. New rules include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues such as cinemas and theatres, and guidance to work from home where possible will return on Monday. Mr Johnson has denied bringing forward announcements to divert attention from the row.
Just as the 1922 committee, way back in the 1990s, saw Margaret Thatcher, we never thought that the Iron Lady would ever be forced to resign from the premiership, but she was. So basically we're in a situation here, even though Boris has a massive Commons majority, at some point or other, the backbenchers' rebellion could be at such a stage that the Tory party decides there's only one way forward, and that's replace the leader.
Well, the government's Christmas party row continues after it was alleged a second event was held at Conservative Party HQ last December. According to the Times newspaper, the event took place while the capital was under Tier 2 restrictions. It comes after a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about restrictions following an alleged Downing Street party, which forced the resignation of government aide Allegra Stratton. The Scottish budget will be unveiled at Holyrood later, with the Finance Secretary saying it will provide stability and support. Kate Forbes will outline her draft tax and spending plans for next year and 2023 to the MSPs in the first budget to be put forward jointly by the SNP and Scottish Greens. But the Conservatives say spending must support hard-pressed businesses by providing firms in the leisure, hospitality, retail and newspaper sectors with a 75% rates rebate. New government plans could see prosecutors meet the victims of crime before making charging decisions. The Ministry of Justice has launched a consultation into reforms, which Justice Secretary Dominic Raab says will give victims a louder voice. The proposals could see whole neighbourhoods being asked how antisocial behaviour has affected their area. Meanwhile, the minimum victim surcharge could also be raised to £100. Cancer patients should be able to check whether they're eligible for clinical trials, experts have said. The Institute of Cancer Research has suggested patients and doctors should be able to self-refer following a 60% drop in recruitment during COVID. Nearly 1 in 4 people celebrating Christmas will struggle to afford it this year. That's according to research from a national debt charity. Step Change found that 1 in 12 will borrow to pay for festive spending, with a quarter taking a year or more to pay the money back. Those who are borrowing say rising household costs, reduced income and the recent loss of the temporary uplift to universal credit are among the reasons. The aircraft carrier HMS Queen Elizabeth is returning home today following the loss of a £100 million fighter jet at sea. The Royal Navy flagship had originally been expected to return to Portsmouth tomorrow, but that was brought forward due to concerns about the weather. In November, an F-35B Lightning jet crashed into the Mediterranean after tumbling off the flight deck. The jet's pilot escaped unharmed. A member of the carrier's crew has been arrested on suspicion of leaking video footage of the incident. Longer school days are to be trialled in Wales to help students affected by the pandemic recover. The new hours will provide children with additional sessions in art, music, sport and core academic subjects. Education Minister Jeremy Miles says the move is about reducing educational inequalities and improving learner and staff well-being. The 10-week trial will run from spring term next year. And Australia have ended day 2 of the first Ashes test in Brisbane on 343 for 7 to lead England by 196 runs. Travis Head top scored with 112, whilst England missed numerous chances in the field. Ollie Robinson was the pick of the bowlers, taking 3 wickets. I'll be back with the headlines in half an hour. For now, it's back to the briefing.
Very good morning, live from Downing Street. I'm Darren McCaffrey with the briefing here on GB News. Coming up over the next 30 minutes, we're going to have the latest on those Plan B restrictions, which will start to be imposed in England from tomorrow. There's been an angry reaction from Conservative MPs, many suggesting they will vote against them in Parliament. However, the government are arguing they are necessary to slow down this new variant and to ensure that the NHS can cope this winter. We'll be speaking to a top scientist about the data and to a Conservative about the political fallout. Plus, there is an awful lot of political fallout too about what happened potentially in Downing Street in November and December of last year around Christmas parties. Many of the front pages not terribly kind to Boris Johnson this morning. We'll get the latest on the fallout from that. And also, we'll be in Germany, where Angela Merkel yesterday stood down as German Chancellor after 16 years. What will Olaf Scholz, the new Chancellor, mean for Germany and indeed for Germans' relation with the UK? That and much more in the next 30 minutes. As always on the programme, please do get in touch. We want a wide range of views here on GB News. It is the email address gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. A very good morning and welcome to a festive-looking Downing Street, but I don't think the food inside is terribly festive this morning after a very, very difficult day yesterday for the Prime Minister, what some are describing as his most difficult in Downing Street. As I say, the front pages this morning are not terribly kind, many suggesting that it is one rule for them and one rule for the rest of us, as allegations continue to swirl around about what may well have happened on the 18th of December inside Number 10 last year, and also further claims about more parties in November and December. But it also came on the day in which the Prime Minister announced further restrictions to people's lives here in England, moving to Plan B, meaning more face masks in more settings, the introductions of COVID passports in England, and also we're going to see the possibility, and the Prime Minister did hint at this, that he is not ruling out even mandatory vaccinations, talking about how a national conversation may well have to be had about that in the future. Why is the government doing this? Well, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, has been on the TV and the radio this morning explaining that it is doubling the new Omicron variant every 2 to 3 days in the UK, that by Christmas we could well see 1 million infections, and that could put the National Health Service under an awful lot of strain, that these measures are there to slow down the spread of this variant. But let's look at those new restrictions. Our reporter Alice Porter has been looking at some of the detail that emerged from Downing Street yesterday.
In one of Boris Johnson's most dramatic 24 hours in office, he's announced that Plan B COVID restrictions will be introduced in England. So what's new? From Monday, workers will be advised to work from home if possible. Current rules on face masks will be extended on Friday to include most public venues, including cinemas and theatres. And COVID passes proving whether a person has been vaccinated or had a negative test will be required at nightclubs and venues with large crowds. This announcement comes as leaked minutes reveal scientists' fears that the hospital admissions due to the new Omicron variant could reach at least 1,000 a day if restrictions aren't toughened.
There is a delay between people becoming infected with COVID and ending up with symptoms and then with hospitalisation. So there's usually about a 2-week delay. We would therefore not expect that these cases, that the case rates in hospital will start to go up for a number of probably 2 to 3 weeks. And in that period, if you're doubling up at the speed we're talking about now, we move from very small numbers to really substantial numbers, and it will keep on doubling. And that really is the reason why these measures have been announced by the Prime Minister.
The PM has fallen short of asking people to change their Christmas plans. But after the events of last winter, many people will be fearful of what could lie in the weeks ahead. Alice Porter, GB News.
Well, joining me now live in Downing Street is our reporter, Paul Hawkins. Good morning to you, Paul. You've been here all morning. There is a sense, isn't there, for the government that they feel that many of these restrictions are now necessary, given how quickly this variant is spreading in the UK.
Yeah, they're called Plan B measures, but they could be called just-in-case measures, because the message very much from Boris Johnson yesterday was that COVID infections are rising very slowly. You know, they're not rising quickly, but the Omicron variant in particular, that's what's causing the government scientists some concern. it is rising very rapidly, doubling every 2 to 3 days, and they are worried that that could feed into hospitalisation cases rising to a critical level in 2 to 3 weeks' time. So they're saying, let's get ahead of the curve now, let's bring in these measures, and then hopefully in 2 to 3 weeks' time the NHS will still be able to cope. But obviously the critics of Boris Johnson, including his own party members, saying that the early implementation of these COVID measures, it's part of a diversionary tactic, really, from the main issue, which is what happened behind the black door behind us last December.
Yeah, fascinating, isn't it? I think South Africa yesterday reported 20,000 new cases, which is a new record for them. The fear is that it's been driven by this variant. You're right in saying there are suggestions, and some Conservative MPs have even put forward these suggestions, that this announcement was brought forward as a kind of almost dead cat strategy, a distraction strategy from all the allegations swirling around yesterday. There is anger in the Conservative Party, isn't there, this morning?
Huge anger, huge anger. I mean, you had a William Ragg, the Conservative MP, yesterday resign at Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, when he was delivering that statement about Plan B measures in the Commons. And then earlier in the day, the same Conservative MP was questioning Boris Johnson, and he was essentially accusing him of the classic dead cat strategy, which, for those who don't understand, by the way, Linton Crosby, famous Australian political strategist,
helped get Boris Johnson into number 10.
Indeed, and Boris Johnson has openly written about the dead cat strategy, which is you put the metaphorical dead cat on the table, and then everyone's talking about that, and they're not talking about something that you'd rather avoid yourself. So that's the accusation being levelled at Boris Johnson. But yeah, we also had the former Tory Chief Whip Mark Harper as well. He was saying that why would people, I'm paraphrasing essentially, but why should the public be following these rules when those in number 10 are not following them as well? And then you've got the leader of the Scottish Conservatives, Douglas Ross, as well, saying that if the Prime Minister misled Parliament, then he should resign. So there is really not even much private discontent within the Conservative Party, really, at what their leader is doing.
It's all very public.
It's all very public, exactly, and it's out in the open. And really the Prime Minister having to rely on Labour to get the legislation through to enact these Plan B measures.
Yeah, indeed, and I think Douglas Ross also said that he would vote against COVID passports, which he opposed, of course, in Scotland, where they're currently in place. I suppose the kind of wider picture is, we've got a couple of weeks to Christmas, these restrictions will be imposed. Yesterday was a really difficult day for Boris Johnson. Isn't the concern is that the government may well have to go further? I mean, that's what some of the scientists are suggesting this morning, that actually many of these restrictions that are currently in place are actually in place in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland and don't seem to have made that much of a difference.
Yeah.
And Conservative MPs are concerned that the government may well have to impose even further restrictions.
Yeah, they're worried that they may have to go further. I guess the government, though, is saying, and this is the advice from the scientists, which is that if small measures now, we don't have to have big measures like the lockdown later. That's the advice that the scientists are giving the government. That's what the government is telling us. But yeah, how much compliance there is with even these COVID Plan B measures, let alone lockdown, we'll have to wait and see, given the scandal that has engulfed number 10 in the past few days.
OK, Paul, as always, thank you very much indeed. Paul Hawkins there joining us from outside Downing Street. He's been here all morning and will continue to be here all day. Well, let's go to Manchester now, and we can join Bradley Harris, who's our reporter, who is at a nightclub, who clearly will be concerned and indeed very interested in the latest restrictions, because they're going to be one of the venues in which COVID passports will have to be shown from next week in order for people to gain entry. Bradley, what's been the reaction where you are?
Yeah, well, Darren, this is a time when nightclubs will be experiencing Christmas parties, people getting together as we head towards Christmas Day. But instead, we heard the announcement from Boris Johnson, the Prime Minister, last night, saying that from tomorrow, actually, these new coronavirus measures are going to be taking place. Mandatory face coverings. We heard that from our reporter Alice Porter just a moment ago. But it's actually the restrictions from next week on Wednesday, those NHS COVID passes and negative lateral flow test results that are going to get people into venues like nightclubs that are causing a little bit of concern for nightclub owners, in particular John Hamilton, who owns Bar Pop on Canal Street. That's where I'm standing now. This entire street, in fact, is lined with nightclubs, all open past 1 a.m, all have dance floors, all of which will be requiring people to come in with an NHS COVID pass, proving that they've been double jabbed or that they've had a negative lateral flow test in the past 48 hours. That's from Wednesday next week in England. But We know that this measure is already in place in other places around the United Kingdom, in Wales and in Scotland. And actually, what we've seen is that according to the Nighttime Industries Association, they've said that COVID passes in Scotland and Wales have caused a 30% and 26% drop off in trade, respectively. So that's according to the Nighttime Industries Association. But John Hamilton was saying, look, we're still going to be open. It's actually in those months in January and February, New Year's Eve, those parties are going to be really big. What's the reaction going to be if people have to try and prove that they've been double jabbed? He worries that there's going to be a drop in trade, a drop in customers coming to the nightclub and enjoying a night out. He also is worried about how he's going to manage this. 1 minute he says he's having to ease restrictions and actually let people in as normal. Next, he's having to introduce NHS COVID passes. And he's also a little bit worried about what the financial impact this is going to have if people decide not to turn up. So certainly a worry from John and probably many of the other nightclub owners here in Manchester. Of course, we'll have to wait and see how the public react as those measures are brought into place from next Wednesday in England.
Bradley, thank you very much indeed. That's Bradley Harris there joining us live from Manchester's Canal Street, where of course those restrictions will have a pretty big impact. Well, let's now get the political reaction to all of this, and my word, there is an awful lot of it. And let's speak to former Conservative Cabinet Minister David Mellor, who joins us down the line. Very good morning to you, David.
Good morning.
First of all, many people are describing yesterday as one of Boris Johnson's most difficult days in office. You've been around the block a few times, it's fair to say. What's your sense of things? Oh, and we appear to have lost David there, unfortunately. I hope we can speak now to our next guest, Dr. Chris Smith, about the science when it comes to what is involved with this coronavirus. Okay, well, let's just carry on now, where we're going to pick up, because we just lost David Mellor, haven't we? We're going to try and get that connection back up. And indeed, we'll talk about the political fallout, where we've had an awful lot of an angry reaction from people in the party, the Conservative Party, who've reacted pretty angrily to all of this, not least of all some of the restrictions when it comes to what's been happening inside that was potentially going to be imposed in England. Those restrictions, of course, face masks going to be reintroduced in some settings from tomorrow, that we're going to see the extension of the COVID passport scheme to England from next week. Many Conservative MPs very, very angry about that. And in addition to all of this, that we are potentially going to see further restrictions given the concern about the spread of this new variant. Let's bring in our reporter again, Paul Hawkins, who joins us, trying to talk to David Mellor, and he dropped out there for some political reaction.
Thanks, David.
But we are kind of trying to gauge that, aren't we? That sense that, you know, there could be a reasonably big rebellion within the Conservative Party in all of this.
Yeah, indeed there could be. Yeah, I mean, we're hearing that a lot of backbenchers aren't going to vote for this legislation when it goes through, and that it's really quite remarkable that the Prime Minister is going to have to rely on political support from Labour to get this legislation through, so he can enact these Plan B measures. But yeah, there's a lot of disquiet on the backbenches from the Conservative Party, not only in terms of that they're unhappy with these Plan B measures because of the economic impact that it could have, but also they're unhappy with the way the Prime Minister has been dealing with this current crisis. A lot of them saying he could have just held his hands up at the beginning. He could have said, I don't know what the facts are, I wasn't there, but I'm going to hold an inquiry and then at least close this temporarily for now. But the fact that he was denying it and then the video came out, and the way he's handled it since then, it's kind of, they're saying that it's another example of his political misjudgment.
Yeah, and that is the kind of concern, isn't it, for the government kind of going forward. There is, though, a real economic impact to this. We know that many kind of businesses have had to cancel Christmas parties, haven't they, because of concerns about this new variant, or indeed kind of further restrictions. The pound fell yesterday. We know that some cabinet ministers were arguing earlier on this week that they thought this could be very damaging for the economy, and we have to remember that as well, that these restrictions will have an economic impact for lots and lots of businesses and small businesses up and down the country.
Especially in the hospitality industry. That is where it seems that these COVID passes are particularly going to hurt. I had one business expert yesterday saying that in Wales, Northern Ireland and Scotland, where these COVID passes have been brought in, that it has hurt businesses by around 20% in terms of turnover. So there will be an impact on the hospitality industry, which of course was suffering already from the effects, the long-term effects of the pandemic. So yeah, there's a lot to take in there in terms of the effects on the economy from these COVID passes. And indeed, how is it actually going to work? Because we don't have a lot of detail, do we? We're talking about working from home, but then also attending Christmas parties. It seems like that would feed into the narrative that this was rushed out early in order to be a diversionary tactic for the Prime Minister.
OK, Paul, thank you very much indeed. I think we can go back to David Mellor, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, who joined us down the line. David, I was suggesting to you that you've been around the block a few times, that you've seen lots and lots of political stories and indeed scandals. What's your sense of yesterday and how difficult?
I think it was a disastrous day for Boris Johnson, because Boris doesn't seem to be on a learning curve, and it's now become humiliating for him, embarrassing for the Conservative Party, and a bit of a laugh for lots of members of the public who think, well, if they tell us to do things, but if they're not going to do them, why should we? So we have a new pantomime this season, Boris in Blunderland. And I don't understand why an intelligent man like Boris Johnson doesn't actually get his act together. You know, it's as Rabbie Burns memorably wrote, "Oh, that God the gift he gives to see oursel as others see us." Well, you know, when is Boris going to wise up to the fact that it might have been amusing to be a clown when he was on the after-dinner circuit and all of that, but to be a clown when Prime Minister at a particularly worrying time for this country is not good. And I think it's obvious now that the dissent is running through the country and is emphasised in the opinion polls, but there's also dissent running through the Conservative Party. What saves Boris is he has carefully promoted people into senior cabinet ranks who are not rivals to him. And the difficulty for a Conservative MP at the moment is, well, we know Boris is pretty hopeless. Who would be any better?
In saying that, David, the thing is, I know there was opinion polls out yesterday saying, some people saying the Prime Minister should resign, a majority of people in several opinion polls. But actually, he still does seem really quite popular in many parts of the country. Many of our viewers quite like him. The Conservative Party are neck and neck with Labour in the polls, even mid-term amidst this difficult period. If there was an election tomorrow, you wouldn't bet against him winning. And isn't that the point about the Conservative Party leaders? They just like winners.
Yes, and but there comes a point, you know, when things suddenly fall off a cliff. Yeah, I'm not anti-Boris. I think that Boris did a very good job in, first of all, whether Brexit is a good idea or a bad idea. He got it through. It was necessary to do that. And he won a much bigger majority, say, than David Cameron could ever have managed, and more than Theresa May could have dreamt of. But that's why I come back to the business about Boris trying to look in the mirror and see what people see about him. He seems personally to be shambolic. It seems as though he has surrounded himself in Downing Street by people who think they're running a sort of students' union rather than running the country. This Allegra Stratton nonsense, I know it happened a year ago, but it's as if these people are saying rules are for little people. We are big people, and we don't have to obey the rules. And Boris should see this. It's as clear as, you know, the hair on his head, which is always pretty clear. What he needs to do is to get a grip. And if he doesn't get a grip, at a certain point, confidence will collapse. And when confidence collapses, it's not readily regained. You think of John Major back in 1992, won an election, did very well, but then had the disaster and sadness for John. It was a good man, that he pulled the economy round with Ken Clarke as Chancellor and so on. But by that time, the public had got so disillusioned with the Conservatives that Tony Blair immediately took over and won comfortably and inherited an economy that was in great shape. This is the worry.
OK, Dave, just always appreciate your thoughts, as always. David Mellor there, former Conservative Cabinet Minister, as I say, who's seen a few political stories emerge from Downing Street over the years. As always, though, we want to get your views on this. Do get in touch. Maybe you like Boris Johnson. Maybe you think we're being entirely unfair to him this morning, although the newspapers are. Do get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or tweet us at gbnews. Let's move away from some of the politics and move on to the science of this. We can now speak to Dr. Chris Smith. He's a virologist and presenter of the Naked Science podcast and joins us down the line. Good morning to you, Chris.
Good morning.
The Health Secretary this morning saying that it is entirely credible that the NHS will struggle this winter given the spread of this new variant. What's your sense about the government's actions yesterday on Plan B? Do they go too far? Are they about right, or maybe not far enough?
Well, pretty much every commentator you'll approach on this subject will say it's very early days or it's too early to tell. What the government have really been spooked by is data from South Africa initially, now from our own country, showing that this new variant does spread very fast. In South Africa, they went from about a month ago having a few hundred cases of Delta coronavirus in their country per day to now thousands of cases, as in north of 10,000 cases. And that's attributable to this new variant. And it's infecting people who are both vaccinated, unvaccinated, and recovered from prior infection with coronavirus, which gives us the impression that under certain circumstances, it does appear to dodge around the immunity, which is conferred by catching the infection or by being vaccinated, or at least being vaccinated with what we regarded previously as fully vaccinated. Now, what the South Africans are saying is that, and it probably is too early to tell, they're not seeing a great translation of those cases into consequences, not at the same rate that we would have done with other prior variants of the virus. And for that reason, there's a degree of kind of moderation or some kind of tempering in the hysteria here. But at the same time, because we don't know for sure yet, and it may well be that it's going to take 2 or 3 weeks before the cases do begin to turn into consequences, like people becoming sufficiently unwell they have to go to hospital, they are being cautionary, and the measures that are being put in place are using Omicron as the excuse, but actually they are useful as a backstop against Delta as well, which Chris Whitty, Chief Medical Officer, has reminded us many times, including again at yesterday's press briefing, that Delta remains the lion's share of the problem for the country at the moment, with 50,000 cases a day and going up. And it's that at the moment we will actually see more of a struggle with. So these measures will help against that too. So I think this is a middle ground, helping against Omicron in a cautionary way, as yet to be determined what its impact truly will be, but with Delta as the background big problem that's currently putting us all under pressure already.
And Chris, just briefly, if you can, because we haven't got much time, unfortunately, can you just explain this idea? Because I think people sometimes don't necessarily understand. It's not that easy to understand, which is that even with kind of milder symptoms or even more asymptomatic cases, actually, if it's more transmissible, significantly more transmissible, in some ways that's worse because it means lots of people getting it at the same time.
Yes, something that transmits more and gets to more people, even if it's milder, on average, there will still be potentially some serious infections. So if you get more infections all at once because something spreads more, you will get more of those severe cases, albeit at a lower frequency as a proportion of the total number of cases, which is still sufficient if they all arrive all at once, a bit like traffic all converging on one junction all at once. You get a traffic jam. You get that traffic jam, this time though it's ambulances at A&E.
Okay, Dr. Chris Smith, always appreciate your insight and your thoughts and your analysis. Thank you very much indeed. That's Dr. Chris Smith, the virologist and presenter of the Naked Science podcast, with his views and thoughts this morning on that news that England is going to move into Plan B, essentially starting from tomorrow. Significant changes yet again to our lives in the run-up to Christmas. Well, that is it from the briefing for this morning. I'll be back again at 3 o'clock in the studio this afternoon. Glory, of course, is here at 12. Up next, it is Patrick and Mercy with To The Point. But before all that, at 9:30, let's get the news. Thanks for watching. I'll see you later.
I'm Olivia Guthrie. Here are the latest headlines. Boris Johnson is facing a revolt from Tory backbenchers who are questioning the government's credibility in enforcing England's Plan B COVID rules. The backlash from the Prime Minister's party comes amid allegations of a Downing Street Christmas party last year. New rules include extending mandatory masks to indoor public venues such as cinemas and theatres, and guidance to work from home where possible will return on Monday. Well, the government's Christmas party row continues after it was alleged a second event was held at Conservative HQ last December. According to the Times newspaper, the event took place while the capital was under Tier 2 restrictions. It comes after a leaked video showing Number 10 staff laughing about restrictions following an alleged Downing Street party, which forced the resignation of government aide Allegra Stratton. The Scottish budget will be unveiled at Holyrood later, with the Finance Secretary Kate Forbes saying it will provide stability and support. It's the first budget to be put forward jointly by the SNP and Scottish Greens, but the Scottish Conservatives say spending must support hard-pressed businesses by providing a 75% rates rebate. And Australia have ended day 2 of the first Ashes test in Brisbane on 343 for 7 to lead England by 196 runs. Travis Head top scored with 112, whilst England